Limits of the Flesh, Chapter 42, Fantasy Fiction by Azazyel. Koneko took a deep breath as Ni and Lee made themselves quiet as they sat across from us on the completely opposite side of the room, as they knew Koneko found this to be rather embarrassing. Just relax and try to learn how to follow the ebbs and flow of our life force moving between one another, Koneko spoke as she laid atop me, and then with a shimmy, she slid her robe off and her nude form pressed against my bare chest. As Koneko pressed against me, I felt her pressing her nose into my neck as she took in my natural pheromones, which calmed her as the sandalwood vanilla smell that was pheromones calmed her nervousness and reminded her of the times she would all but sit in my lap as she baked in the pheromones. "That's nice," I muttered as I hugged her closer at the feeling of her warm life force pushing into my body and then pulling a tiny bit of my weaker life force before returning back into me, as the life force was almost washed within her body as it came back into my own body. Thus, I understood why this was called bedroom arts, as not to mention how any clothes would prevent the transfer of life force, but the feeling itself as my conceptual life force / lifespan being traded back and forth was as intimate as it came. And just like intercourse, it was a give-and-take situation, as I quickly, with the help of my flesh-crafting abilities, was able to read her biological movements. Even if the result was spiritual in nature, I was still able to gradually copy her internal magical motion to push my life force into her. "Your life force is weak due to having your soul mangled by the most taxing Longinus, but your life force is the purest I have ever felt." Koneko sighed softly as she melted against me. "It certainly feels nice," I offered somewhat lamely, but what else could be said about all but fucking your partner with your ethereal life force? "Humph. This is just the first level of bedroom arts. If we were actually, doing the do, our souls would almost meld." Supposedly masters of this form of senjutsu have literally fallen into a mutual coma, living not but on the shared infinite life force between the two of them, until plants grew over their forms and they became one with the earth. Koneko spoke softly but earned a roll of my eyes as I shifted and just wrapped my arms around her petite frame. "Hey, Jake?" Koneko asked quietly, so as for Ni and Lee to not be able to hear, who had gone to messing around on some kind of handheld gaming console, as they had already picked up Koneko's advice on how to use bedroom arts, and being bored cats, they found some entertainment. "Do you think I look weird? Because I don't have huge knockers like Rias, Bakino, and the rest of your creations?" she asked quietly as her eyes flickered over to Ni and Lee. Which made sense. They were both catgirls, even if from a different subspecies, but still, Ni and Lee were more developed than her. I couldn't help but roll my eyes before chuckling softly as I booped her nose, making her yellow-slitted eyes blink in surprise as I spoke. "Koneko, I have literally scanned your DNA, I can tell you here and now that you are going to end up getting as busty, if not more than EI or Monet. Not as much as Aquino or Rias, but they had literally series-defining boobs, and every time they walked down the stairs, they would get smacked in the face by them if they got any airtime. You just got to get to that second weird neckish puberty within yourself," I whispered to her, and she nodded, sighing as she allowed her cat ears and tail to pop out of her body, and I hummed as I moved an arm down her back to softly grasp her white tail that matched her hair. "Neo." Koneko sighed, pouting at the feeling as I ran my hand down the length of her tail before letting go of it. But her tail stood straight up in the air for a couple of moments before limply falling back down, which is what made Koneko pout at me letting go of her tail. "Jake, can you make your sweat into catnip?" Koneko suddenly asked with a bit more volume than our previous whispering, and I just blanked at that ridiculous question before my head whirled at the thought, and I realized that I did have trace amounts of nepidolactone within myself that could be used to give cats the typical hallucinogenic euphoria all cats from lions to domestic cats would experience. "What, are you asking to make my skin into something like a cat's salt rock licking toy flavored with catnip, Koneko?" I asked Koneko dryly, with Ni and Lee even pausing their games before Lee, the more rambunctious red-headed one, spoke up. "If that's the case, make it on your dick, haha." She joked, with Koneko turning pink at the crude joke before she rolled her eyes as she pushed down the embarrassment to take back on her cool demeanor. "Perverted thoughts aside, but can you, Jake?" she asked with curiosity, so after a moment of combining the trace amounts of nepidolactone and moving it around, I just put a finger to her nose. "Smell and find out," I said with a smile as the condensed chemicals burnt out Koneko's higher-thinking parts of her brain as she giggled, slumping against me as her life force surged with the natural mating pheromone chemicals that sent cats that inhaled the chemicals into a frenzy. "Huh, you two come over here as well," I ordered Ni and Lee after feeling Koneko's life force matching my own movements in our sharing of life force. Do you want us to join you, Master Jake? Ni, the blue-haired demure new Nekasher, spoke as her two tails popped out from behind her as her eyes dilated at the sight of our nude forms. Yes, but no funny business for now. Koneko certainly isn't in the right mind now anyway. I joked wryly but Ni and Lee just shrugged, stripping out of their clothes, and as Koneko lay directly on my chest the two girls took my sides as they pressed up against me. But before I could relax for a nap or something, Lee whispered hotly into my ear. So that whole licking post joke, can you make your neck like that? That sounds yummy, and we are going to be here a while, Jake. Even as I did so, and I got to enjoy the feelings of rougher than normal tongues on my neck, I remembered DxD was a softcore porn world, and this was just par for the course. But finally, as my mind stilled, and I fell asleep into a comfortable nap with my body filled to the brim with the life force of these beautiful cat girls, I felt Koneko licking my chest as well.